feel like it's been so long since I've sat down and filmed a sewing tutorial and shared it with you guys. I'm sorry it's been so long, but also life just happens and I'm doing my best and here we are. I've made a comeback. So today I'm going to be taking you through the steps of how to create this top. This is one that I have worn and washed many a time, so as you can tell it's kind of like faded compared to the latest one that I have made, which is a classic. I have styled her in so many different ways. You might be able to tell, or maybe not, but you can adjust it in different areas to make it suit your body or your style better, and I will share those little tips and tricks as we go through the process. I feel like this is pretty beginner friendly. It could be handy to have some sewing projects up your sleeve so that you feel familiar with stuff, but you could definitely just jump into this if you have the confidence and you think you can pull it off. And if you want to also add something similar to this to your wardrobe, this is what you'll need. So obviously we will need some fabric. I will put the recommended amount per size in the description box of this video. I have gone for, I think it's like a cotton poplin, which is just like a very generic fabric that you can find generally at any fabric store. I don't think there's really a fabric that wouldn't work for this. Maybe steer clear of stretch materials. I feel like that would just make this a lot harder. Even like a sheer material could be cute if you wanted to like layer it over the top of a tank top or a regular top. That could be adorable. Or if you want to go like a regular cotton or linen or I don't know, whatever you have access to. I think that's why this project is so great. You can probably just use whatever you have laying around already. I personally feel like thinner materials will work best because it will bunch up nicely. Thicker materials might be a bit too bulky, so I would personally avoid that. But if you have a certain idea or style, go for it. These are only ever recommendations. Then once you've got your material, we'll then need some strips of elastic. I have made similar gathered crop style tops before, but in those ones I have used a shirring thread to give the elastic effect, whereas this one I've literally just added strips of elastic on the inside. And I feel like personally it makes it more intentional where you add the gathered effect, and then also I feel like it's going to last longer and be more supportive, whereas shirring thread sometimes can lose its stretchiness over time and it becomes a bit like just oversized and not fitting how you would like it to. I've had this one for almost a year and the stretch is still how we want it, so love that. To figure out how much elastic you'll need, I will recommend measuring your widest point, whether that's like your bust area, your stomach, I don't know, wherever we are covering, measure that, and then roughly figure out how many lines of elastic you're going to add. This one I've only got 4 on there, whereas this one I think I added 5, no, I did 4. I did 4 on both of these. But if you find that you want the lines to be closer, you'll obviously end up using more. If you want them to be more spread out, then you'll end up using less. If you don't think you can pre-figure it out, just get enough for 4 or 5 strips, as that will at least cover probably the maximum that we would use. That measurement that you find, times that by 5 or however many rows you need. I personally would just go for the worst case scenario so that you have more rather than not enough. For the width of the elastic, I have gone for I think like roughly a 1 centimeter width. I think that's roughly just under ½ an inch. I feel like that is a comfortable width where your stitch will easily be able to cover it. And again, for the type of elastic, if you have the ability to go physically into a store and be able to touch it, maybe go for the more softer styles, just because it is directly going to be touching your skin. If there is a better description that I can find, I will put it on the screen. I think there's like woven or bikini or something styles that are normally a bit softer, so I'll try to find the wording if possible. And then we'll just need some basic essentials like some matching thread to our material, some fabric scissors, fabric chalk, a measuring tape, some pins, and then our trusty old sewing machine. I just wanted to take a quick break to thank the sponsor of today's video, who you may have seen me sporting throughout this video already, and that is Midi. I've got that beautiful figure range on, as you can see, the earrings and a few of these rings. And I've also got some old classics on that I have had for actually a few years now, as I personally like to wear the simple dainty pieces probably like throughout the day or while I'm working, or just little in-between moments that I can always keep on. And then these more like bolder, organic and chunky statement pieces, I love to throw them on, especially if I know that I need to run from the studio out to dinner or lunch or something like that, and I just know that they will help elevate an outfit, so we love that. Their jewelry is made from responsibly sourced sterling silver, and they've also got the 18 karat gold vermeil range as well. You can use the link in the description box of this video to check out their collection of stunning pieces like I am representing today. They've got so many pieces that you can help add a bit of class or character or whatever you think you're missing to your outfit with these statement or even dainty pieces, so definitely check it out. And now let's get back into sewing. For the first step, we need to grab our measuring tape so we can get some key measurements from our body, and that will help us to be able to cut out the first panels. To find the cutting length of our panel, we need to do a little bit of calculating to figure it out. We're going to grab the bust measurement, So if my full bust measurement is 33 inches and I times that by 1.5, it's going to be, I think, roughly 49.5 inches. I'm just going to round that up to 50 inches as we are working with an oversized fit. So once we have that amount, we'll then divide that by 2. So for me, if I had 50 inches, that will then end up being 25 inches. And then I will add 2 inches to that. So my cutting length for one panel is going to be 27 inches. So again, find your full bust, times that by 1.5 to get that looser fit, then divide it by 2, and that will help us get to one panel. And then we're just adding 2 inches for seam layouts. Hope that makes sense. And then for the cutting height or width of the panel, as you can see, this sits pretty in line with my underarms. So find the point where that is in line with on your chest. It could be like your mid chest, lower chest, or even just wherever you're comfortable for it to sit, and then measure down to the point where you want it to finish. I normally wear high-waisted pants, so I'm happy for this to finish at the high-waisted point, which for me is around my belly button. So that is 9 inches. This of course is where you can customize yours. So if you want it to be shorter and ultra crop, or longer to cover low-rise things that you might be wearing, find that measurement, and then we're going to add 2 inches for seam layouts. So my cutting width is going to be 11 inches. For step 2, it is time to then grab those measurements and plot them out on the fabric. I find if I measure out the first panel, I can then cut that out and then use that as a template to cut the second piece. Otherwise, obviously, you're more than welcome to use your fabric chalk to mark out the 2 panels and go ahead and cut them out. So now that we have those panels all cut out, it is time to start assembling it. So I would recommend to prep your machine at this point and get the matching thread in the bobbin, and then we'll grab those 2 panels ready to layer in preparation for a French seam. You can obviously zigzag or overlock the edges on the inside, but I just find when we are doing something like this, it's just nice to have a clean edge. So if you haven't done a French seam, I will talk you through that. Lay down one of your pieces with the bad side facing up or the good side facing down. Lay the second panel down so that the 2 bad sides are facing each other, and therefore the 2 good sides are facing outwards. So once you've got that all lined up, you can then pin down the 2 side edges, and that's where we're going to sew down to join these first 2 sections. When sewing this line, I would recommend doing it as close as you can to the raw edge, ideally anywhere from 1/2 centimeter or 1/4 of an inch below. If for some reason it is a bit harder to achieve that, that is fine, we end up trimming bits off later. If you have sewn before, you would know that normally you would face the good sides together, and that would create a normal seam. This is just the extra step we need to create a French seam. Again, if you don't understand what a good or bad side is, I personally found with fabric like this where it's just a block color, you might just need to pick one and just go for it. Whereas if you've got a print, you can generally tell there is a more brighter side, so that is your good side, and the more dull underside is the bad side. Now that those 2 lines are sewed in place, we'll go back to those raw edges and just trim any excess seam allowance off. So now the edge is as close as possible to that line that we have sewn. And the reason we do that is because we are now going to flip the garment so it is inside out, the good sides are facing, and we're going to sew a second seam line. So before we do that, if you have an iron handy, it might be a good idea to iron the edges so they're a nice crisp edge. Otherwise, if you don't have an iron handy, or if you're just lazy like me, I find that you can fold on the existing seam that you have created, make sure it's nice and tight, and then go on the edge of a table and kind of like do it like that. And that just helps kind of hold it in place. Hopefully that makes sense. Either way, figure out how to make the edge nice and crisp. So now that those 2 good sides are facing, we're just going to sew down those 2 edges, again creating a new seam. This part I would recommend sewing about 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch from the edge, and that way you're pretty likely to hide the raw edges within this new seam. If you do find that you sew this line and you flip it around and there are any loose threads or raw edges hanging out, 2 ways you can go about this is releasing those frayed edges and trimming them off, or if there's a lot hanging out, I would recommend flipping it back so the good sides are facing and sewing a new seam line so that it is a little bit further inwards and therefore hiding those raw edges. Sweet, so once you've done that, that means our French seams are all done. If that's your first time doing a French seam, congratulations and welcome to the world of clean inner seams. Next up, it is time to clean the top and bottom edges. So to do this, we're just going to do a double folded edge or a rolled hem. You might find it's easier to do one entire fold and then do the other fold and then pin that in place. An iron might help keep these edges folded in place, and therefore you can pin it and it will just stay nice and crisp. Otherwise, just do about a 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch fold around the entire bottom and top edge, and then repeat that for a second fold, pin it in place, and then we will just sew one line entirely across both of these edges, and that will be our hem complete. Now it's time to start focusing on the elastic. First, we're going to mark out the placements on the inside of our top so that we can figure out how many pieces we'll need. So flip your garment inside out, pick which edge you would like to be the top. This comes down to personal preference. This top that I am wearing, I placed the mark quite literally just under the hemmed edge, whereas this one has a bit more of a, I guess, frilly feature along the top. And that is about 2 centimeters or almost an inch off the top edge. Hopefully seeing that will help you decide what you want. So place the first mark, the preferred distance that you would like from the top edge. Then we're going to figure out the gaps between each of these elastic lines. Now you can very easily just do an equal distance between each of these elastic lines and remove overthinking it. So go ahead and do that if you would like to. I'd probably recommend 2 to 3 inches per line. Whereas for me, I kind of done different distances between each one just because I feel like it sits well with my body. So the first one I did 1.5 inches, so therefore it's still sitting on my bust line. The second one I did 3 inches from that point because I find that that starts to sit nicely on my waist area. And then I think the last one I did, again, might have been a repeat of 3 inches or 2 inches. You can probably see what I ended up doing based on the video you're watching. So find the preferred distance you would like between each of these lines, mark it out in one line, and then just repeat that entirely around the fabric. So eventually, once you have measured each of these distances equally around the entire bit of fabric, you'll find that there are matched up lines which will indicate where you're going to lay the elastic on. So you can see what I've done. Hopefully yours looks like that. And now it's time to cut out the elastic. I didn't do this in the initial stages because I find rather than grabbing a measuring tape and cutting the elastic out to that, it's easier to wrap it around your body in the different areas that it's going to sit, and therefore cut it so it feels like it's nice and snug. As our bodies are varied in all these different areas, it will end up being a little bit different and therefore fitting nicer. Generally we'll have one at the top, one probably along your bust line, and then however many you've got following down, I have 2 more on my waist area. I just popped my elastic around these areas, making sure to give it a little bit of a stretch just so it feels snug, but I guess in a bit of a Goldilocks process where not too tight, not too loose, just the perfect little amount where it feels like a bit of pressure. If that's overwhelming, pull it to the point where it sits and then give it a little elasticized stretch. Once you've figured out that comfortable point, make sure to add 1 inch to this length, and that is going to allow us to overlap it and join it to make a full circle. So do that for all the varying areas. I'm only going to use 4 rows. Then we're going to start joining them to create full circles. So make sure that they're all nice and straight and not twisted because that will be very annoying. We'll then overlap our elastic by 1 inch, switch our machine to a zigzag stitch and just zigzag stitch back and forth so that this overlapping edge is nice and secure. You should be able to stretch it and it stays in place. Repeat that for all of your elastic pieces so that they are all now joined circular pieces. And then it's time to start joining the elastic to the inside of our top. Once you've cut out those bits of elastic, it might be good to lay it out in the sequence of the lengths and where they're sitting. So I think my 2 top pieces were larger than my 2 bottom pieces, so I just laid it out in that order so I remembered. So to attach the first piece of elastic, we will flip the garment inside out and focus on those lines that we have marked out. Fold the full circular piece of elastic and you'll see that obviously the elastic is shorter than the material. That is for obvious reasons, that is going to help pull it in and create that gathered effect. So now that you've got that elastic folded, pin one of those folded edges onto the seam edge of the top, wrap the rest of the elastic entirely around this garment and match the other folded half of the elastic to the other seam. At this point, you might need to stretch out the elastic to match it or just bunch up the material within. So now you've got those 2 ends pinned in place. You can either stretch out the elastic to match the flatness of the material and hold it in place and sew along and just use that as an indicator. Or if you feel that you need more pins in between, that's perfectly fine. It'll help the need to stretch it out and kind of see where you're at. To do that, you can either fold that section in half, find that point, and find the half of the front of the top and the back of the top and pin that in place. We'll then switch our machine to a zigzag stitch and just start sewing this elastic onto the inside of the fabric. Again, making sure that the elastic is sitting in line with its designated marks. For me, this is my top line of elastic. I will match it to all the top dots that I have on my fabric. It can feel like quite a bit going on as you're trying to stretch out the elastic, match it to the dot points, and just make sure everything is aligning and looking how you want it to. So just take it slow if you need. Keep double checking that the upcoming line of elastic is matching to the next dot that you have. I find if I kind of just focus on sections at a time, so stretch out the elastic, match it to the next dot, sew that line, and then just kind of readjust again. stretch, match, and sew. Just keep thinking that while you're sewing. Stretch, match, sew. Just continue doing that the whole way around the elastic until you get back to where you started. Obviously making sure that we are back stitching at the beginning and the end to hold it in place. And then you'll find that your first bit of elastic has helped create at least one gathered line. And then we essentially just repeat that for the rest of the lines of elastic. Fold your elastic, match it at the points that you want to, and then stretch, match, and sew. I love that. Once you finish all those rows of elastic, you should have a new fun top. Like I mentioned earlier, I think I went into it wanting 5 lines on this one, and then I kept trying it on. I was happy to stop at the 4th line and have a bit more of a frilly section at the bottom, whereas this one, I think I made it shorter and then just had less of a gap, so it's a bit more of a simpler style. I made this top at the beginning of our Australian summer, wore it all summer long, even still wear it now. Obviously being in winter, I just layer it up a bit more, but I am releasing this during the Northern Hemisphere summer, so if you're up there, enjoy this for your summer. I hope that was fun. Hope it came together how you imagined. Hope this all made sense. Thanks for tuning in and for all of your support. Sorry it has been so long between sewing tutorials. I've got so many more in the works. Keep an eye out for them. If you do happen to make this top, tag me at the Essentials Club on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you find me, as I always love seeing your outcomes wherever you are. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you guys in the upcoming videos.